Yes. Well, thank you so much, Hari. Just a pleasure to see so many lake experts, enthusiasts, and Frank and I from Global Waterworks, which is a charity based out of Chicago, Illinois, but serving the whole globe, are just thrilled to be partnering with the World of Water Action Forum on the activities we see happening, starting with Bangalore and now expanding to Chennai and Trichy and many cities across India. And we hope to bring you also to the Americas. And today's program offers an additional opportunity that we haven't realized. And I was fortunate to encounter Dave and his team at an India conference, the Water and Waste Management Conference last year, and was shocked when I discovered that the problems with our lakes, that muckiness that you experience on the bottom of the lakes, that horrible algae bloom that we see that everyone says, why can't we get rid of that, can actually be addressed with the solution that Dave has come up with. And the solution is not just technology, it's not just a process, but it's a very holistic method that involves nature and systems thinking. And it's an exciting one. I'm going to turn it over to Dave in just a moment. I just want to tell you, I got the chance to speak with one of his clients recently, and he described the process as nothing short of miraculous. And the reason he said that was because for 2 years, their lake had been shut down due to these harmful algae blooms and a toxicity that had created a threat to the local people and animals, and they didn't know what to do. They had tried a number of things, and they learned about Dave's process, brought them in midsummer, and within just 2 months, they saw a radical change in their lake, and it has been restored to what he describes as pristine condition, how it was in the 1960s when he could walk on a sandy bottom. And so the process eradicates the weeds, it takes off the sediment, the drudge that has built up over time, and it allows people to live in peace with farmers who are fertilizing and adding more nutrients, because it is helping Mother Nature through simple enzymes. And Dave's the pro on this, but I also want to let you know that it's very affordable. I was shocked to learn that that the team that was working on the lakes was able to address this problem in an amount that they could immediately approve, because it made so much sense. And I'll let Dave talk to you about the process and the economics, and he has a presentation to share, and we'll include some links in the chat so you can also reference him in the Global Waterworks community after today's call. But please also note your questions there. We will have time for questions after. And thank you once again for joining us. We hope you'll find this time worthwhile, and we look forward to your input on this process so that we can actually make it happen and restore India's lakes. And Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to cover a very broad amount of subject matter at a very shallow level, but there'll be questions afterwards where we can go into more detail. We are an international company. We have operations and manufacturing facilities in Australia and the US, and we've done projects in 29 different countries around the world. Our sort of commonality with Global Waterworks is this whole issue of solving the global water crisis. We believe we have technology and solutions that are critical to that. And what that really is all about is, we use water to drink, to cook, to bathe, for hygiene, and for waterborne sanitation. And when we cannot use water, it becomes a crisis. And that is something that is happening globally in first world and in emerging markets and so on. So just to set the picture, I want to just make sort of 6 simple observations, really. Natural infrastructure, lakes, dams, rivers, and so on, they have been able to renew water for millions and millions of years. So animals have been, and humans have been defecating and urinating into water. Leaves and stuff have been dying on the land, decomposing, the nutrients wash into the water, and leaves fall directly into the water and die. They decompose, the nutrients are cleared from the water, and the water quality is sustained and has been for millions of years. So nature is able to renew water. The problem is that in the last 100 years or so, 100 years, 200 years, depending, nutrient overloads have been driving the eutrophication of our natural infrastructure. That's because of population growth, urbanization, which concentrates people in a specific area, that concentrates the waste, concentrates the discharges, and drives this eutrophication. But what that does is degrade our natural infrastructure. And there are positive feedback loops here. So the worse it gets, the worse it makes itself, and that makes itself worse, and therefore it gets worse. So there's positive feedback to the point where the natural infrastructure is no longer effective and becomes a liability rather than an asset. Because even if you put fresh, clean water into these eutrophic lakes, that water will become contaminated and so on. And so that really brings our focus to the fact that eutrophication is probably the single biggest driver of the global water crisis. And our sort of gut instinct always is to build more infrastructure. And typically, one of the top priorities, and this is one of the mistakes that the first world has made, and really emerging markets need to bear this in mind and learn from these lessons, is we think that by building more wastewater infrastructure, we will improve the situation. But if you think of a situation, if you have a wastewater treatment plant that say is doing 100 megaliters a day, and it has, say it's got to limit the phosphorus discharges to 10 milligrams per liter, and there's 100 megaliters per day. And let's assume at that level, the lake, the rivers downstream can process and clear those nutrients. As we develop, we need to build another wastewater treatment plant. So we build another wastewater treatment plant at 100 megaliters a day, and that must comply with the same standards as the first one. But what you're doing is doubling the nutrient load. If you want to keep the nutrient load the same, you must halve the level of residual nutrients per liter. But we don't do that. We keep compounding the problem. And so this is the trap that we fall into, is thinking we can engineer it better, thinking that more and more infrastructure will solve the problem. But there's an imbalance between the built infrastructure and the natural infrastructure. And the more we focus on the one without focusing on the other, the more we drive that imbalance. So there is a paradox and a trap that we often fall into with regard to this obsession with more and more infrastructure, and that potentially in a lot of places has driven a problem. It's driven eutrophication, and that converts your natural infrastructure into liabilities rather than assets. And we have to get that change of perspective and change of understanding of how we're managing water resources, and get a better balance between built infrastructure and natural infrastructure. And it's only by synergizing the two and getting the two working in concert and together in balance that we are going to be able to get nature working in our favor, rather than setting up the struggle between, as it's kind of fight to the death, and we're not going to win it, between our built infrastructure and the natural infrastructure. So understanding the problem is critical to being able to develop the solutions. So if we go back to this diagram, how we manage water is through the water cycle, is basically we draw water and purify it, treat it, and we bring it into the pipes of our built infrastructure. So in the treatment process, what we do basically is negate all biology. We get pretty close to sterile water, and once water is in our pipes, coming out of our taps, being used, the water in the pipes is essentially abiological. Once we've used it, we flush it and send it down to wastewater treatment plants. It's in the wastewater treatment plants, it's still built infrastructure, but the objective of that infrastructure is to create an environment in which biology can be re-engaged in order to clear nutrients from the water. In a wastewater treatment plant, that is only done at the microbiological level. So basically, we create an environment where bacteria can breed, can take the nutrients out, and we reduce the nutrients quite significantly, quite rapidly. and then discharge it into our natural infrastructure. And this is where 99.99% of water spends 99.99% of its time in this natural infrastructure. And yet we're neglecting it and not ensuring that it can fulfill its function. And any natural water body, be it a river, a lake, a stream, a dam, a reservoir, is a biological ecosystem. And that means that it needs a full biodiverse food web in order to be able to fulfill its function as nutrient clearance infrastructure, which is another word for wastewater treatment infrastructure. So we have a whole lot of potential infrastructure assets there, which could be used to augment and ensure that water is renewed, but that's typically not what's happening. If we get back to that sort of a situation, then we have a harmony, a balance, and a synergy between our built infrastructure and our natural infrastructure, which is missing. And to look at how the problems manifest, so basically, as I say, even though we reduce nutrients in our wastewater discharges, they're still multiplied by millions and billions of liters per day. There's sufficient nutrients that we overload our natural infrastructure. That drives eutrophication. What that means is it destroys the food web. It drives an opportunity for toxic cyanobacteria to become present, and it converts our natural infrastructure from assets into liabilities. And the water becomes unusable. And this is something that is not just an emerging market problem. When that happens, all your built infrastructure in the pipes and distribution systems and so on is of no use to you, because we say we have a water shortage. It's not a water quantity problem. But what we've seen, and these are all examples from the US, it happens every year. There are water shortages because they cannot clean the water because it's toxic and untreatable. And that, in essence, is the crux of the global water crisis. So what I want to do now quickly is drill into eutrophication a little bit more deeply. The word actually means well-nourished. So a well-nourished ecosystem should not be a problem. Why is it a problem? To understand that, we've got to understand the nutrient cycle, where nutrients become biomass. And initially, that is vegetated matter. It's algae that take up nutrients and form biomass. Biomass dies off and becomes nutrients again. So that's a perpetual cycle. But also the biomass can be consumed up the food web and cleared from the water body. So just to quickly talk you through that, we have nutrients coming into our water body. They dissolve nutrients, they nourish aquatic plants, they nourish phytoplankton. The food web, starting at zooplankton and working the way all the way up to fish, they consume that phytoplankton and the biomass and so on. And then that biomass is removed and cleared from the water body by predators, which may be birds or human fishermen or alligators, reptiles, whatever. So, and that is how nature clears nutrients and sustains the water. So as long as we have a fully biodiverse food web, highly productive food web, nature can cope. The problem starts when we have surges in nutrients that cause algae blooms, and there's too much biomass created too quickly. The food web cannot consume it, so the excess dies off, and you now start building up a nutrient stockpile in the sediment. And what that means is then the weeds will die off. They also will decompose and form a nutrient stockpile. So you get a lot of nutrients in the sediment. When they decompose, they draw oxygen from the water, and you get a deoxygenated water column at the base of, at the bottom of the lake, and therefore your animal life cannot exist there. So the food web becomes constrained. So we end up with a situation where we've got more and more weeds, invasive weeds, more and more algae, and instead of a nutrient clearing asset, it becomes a nutrient recycling asset. And stopping further inflows of nutrients is futile, it's too late, because it becomes a self-sustaining system. It also creates conditions that are ideal for cyanobacteria. And I won't go into this in detail, but at the bottom of an anaerobic water body, you will have nitrogen present as ammonia. Cyanobacteria can use that as a nutrient, algae can't. Cyanobacteria can also dive down to the bottom to access those nutrients, algae can't. So the whole thing shifts in favor of cyanobacteria. So just the logic of how you go about solving this, you need to destratify and reoxygenate the water column. That negates a lot of cyanobacteria's competitive advantages in this environment. It also does away with the ammonia and creates an environment where the food web can reestablish itself. Then what we have to do is digest that sediment, get rid of those nutrient stockpiles so the self-sustaining recycling can no longer happen, and get back to a situation where we have a healthy amount of biomass being formed, and we have a food web that can process it, and we have the nutrient clearance taking place. With that, hopefully, you can easily understand why the conventional approaches to dealing with eutrophication are completely misguided, counterproductive, and actually make things worse. If you have a whole lot of invasive weeds and you apply herbicides, you kill them, they go to the bottom, they decompose, you've done exactly what you shouldn't be doing. The same with algicides, whether they are chemical or these newer ultrasonic devices, they kill the algae, it goes to the bottom, it decomposes, it increases the nutrient stockpile. The same with phosphorus precipitants, the same with a lot of aeration systems. So we have to get our heads around the fact that biotechnology is what it's all about. It's not chemistry, physics, or conventional engineering. You cannot go and engineer these huge, big natural water infrastructure assets back. And we're in the domain of systems theory and biotechnology. And what that means is it's biology, it's biochemistry, it's nutrient management applied in an environment that is complex adaptive systems. It's very different science. And what we have done is gone back to first principles. And what that means is the biology applicable in wastewater treatment plants is the same as that of open water bodies if you go back to first principles. So what that means is we're able to engage and deliver solutions in wastewater treatment where we are trying to reactivate biology and in natural water infrastructure. So what I want to do now is talk quickly through some illustrations of the sort of things that we're able to do. As I said, I'm going to go very broad because I know India has a large variety of requirements. So this is intensive livestock production. This is a pig manure pond, which you can see has virtually solidified. It's completely unproductive. It's not processing. The circles are there so you can see it is in fact the same place. We rapidly digest all those solids. The same sort of thing happens in conventional wastewater treatment plants. Anaerobic digesters become congested with solid, undigested sludge. The sludge drying breads, there's no reduction in volume. We end up having to dig them out and dispose of the sludge, real problem. Here, after we have remediated an anaerobic digester, you'll see well-digested, high liquid content. What that means is we get a 80–90% reduction in volume. And instead of having to dig the stuff out, we're able to sweep it out with a broom. We have all the laboratory data to validate this. Similarly, biofilters. What happens here is the media over time gets congested and dysfunctional. This is water flowing out of the biofilter before the introduction of our intervention. This is 2 weeks later, the exact same biofilter, the exact same channel. You can see the improvement in water quality that's achieved. And once again, we have the laboratory data to show that it works. For those that understand this sort of stuff, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, the nitrate and ammonia, you'll see we have high levels of ammonia and very little nitrate. So that nitrogen pathway is blocked. One of the things that we have to do in order to rectify that is clear that, and you can see how we've done that. So the ammonia is converted into nitrate, and therefore you're not having as much ammonia discharged downstream. Activated sludge plants, this is treated water in a clarifier. You can see what a disaster it is. This is the activated sludge tank itself. We decommissioned that aeration system, put in our own aeration system, an oxygenation system. You can see the transformation, and we actually cut their electrical consumption by a little over 80%. And this is where the economics start to play in. This then is the clarifier. A couple of months after we'd begun the intervention, and the camera rather clumsily will pan up, but that's so you can see it is in fact the same place. We haven't gone before in one location after somewhere else. Once again, we have all the data to show what we're able to do. At this plant, they had the same sort of problem. They had post-treatment oxidation ponds, which had become completely solid, and they bypassed them. We recommissioned those because we can use that for further improvement in the water quality. And what we did then was test the final effluent against drinking water standards, not wastewater standards. Not because we claim that we can produce drinking water, but we can produce water that can go into a drinking water treatment plant. And on a lot of the parameters, we achieve those standards. So in the wastewater plant area, we can do anything we need. Here we have Lake Erie. There's a 700 square mile algae bloom, and they say there's a water shortage. It's a water quality issue, not a water quantity issue. This was a river project that we did in France. From the point of intervention, 43 kilometers downstream, we were able to measure and monitor and detect improvements, sustainable improvements over time, bringing water back to the desired quality. Here is the lake completely taken over by invasive weeds because there is invasive muck underneath it. We have detailed bathymetry. We're able to draw a cross-section through the lake, look at it in profile, and you'll see that in July 2019, the average depth was 6.3 feet, and it held 70,000 cubic meters of water. The winter of 2019-2020 was very mild, and the weeds didn't die off. So the client asked us if they could apply a herbicide in order to kill the weeds off. And we agreed that, knowing that those weeds would create additional sediment. And that's exactly what happened. So an additional 5,500 cubic meters of sediment was created. The average depth of the lake reduced from 6.3 to 5.8 feet. However, by October, we had not only worked off that additional, but worked off an additional over 2,000 cubic meters of sediment. So the volume of water had increased 2,500 cubic meters from the initiation. And in the second year, through to October last year, we digested a further 9,000 cubic meters. So this is where we get rid of the weeds, not by killing weeds, but by removing the nutrient rooting beds that they grow in. This shows reduction of nitrate and nitrogen in sediments. This is a before and after of a lake. You can see again, it's completely topped out with weeds. Algae collects in the weeds. This is 5-6 months later at the end of summer. Here's another one using a completely different methodology to quantify the control of invasive weeds. This is one here where the main problem with the invasive weeds, we decrease the sediment, but the invasive weeds, this is what we call a heat map. Where it's red, you have intensive weed invasion. Where it's blue, the lake's too deep for the weeds to grow. You can see how all around the edges, the weeds were growing quite prolifically. 2 years later, you can see how we have decreased and controlled the amount of weeds. This shows you one of our radar units in the lake. When we installed and commissioned, the lily pads were right up. That was positioned right up on the edge of the lily pads. You can see how they've been pushed back. This house on the lake has a beach in front of it, which they couldn't even access. Here we are 2-3 years later. This is a drinking water reservoir in Ohio. They have to draw their water from this river, which is just an algae farm, basically. In summer, it's completely contaminated with algae and cyanobacteria. This is peak summer, the year before we implemented. And you can see in the river, we have 150,000 cells per mil, of which the majority is cyanobacteria. And basically, the profile in the reservoir is pretty much the same, meaning they can't produce safe drinking water. This is the same year the same week, the same time of year, the following summer, after we've implemented the solution, you'll see the situation in the river is still pretty much the same. But in the reservoir, the cell count is about 75% lower, but more importantly, the cyanobacteria is under control. And you'll see how we've increased the diatoms and algae. This shows you one where you can see 100% of the phytoplankton was cyanobacteria at a level of nearly 4.8 million cells per mil. 4 or 5 months later, you can see the cyanobacteria is controlled and we have diversity coming back. That's a before and after photo. Here, similarly, you see the difference between the vegetation on the bottom when it's covered in muck and slime and sludge and when it clears. When it clears, you have a sandy bottom, the fish can spawn and life can come back. To show you the scale of this, this is a drinking water reservoir in Puerto Rico. It is 850 acres. It is 55, 60 meters deep. They could not draw water. If they drew water from the 3 gates near the surface, it was so full of algae that they couldn't process it. And if they drew water from lower down, it was so strongly tainted with geosmins and bad flavors and smells and so on, that wasn't acceptable either. The fish kills had, fish kills were extensive. The fishermen have stopped going there. We restored the fish population. The pelicans came back, as did the fish eagles. That is the ultimate test and proof of the fact that we are regenerating the food chain and restoring the nutrient clearance capacity. Perhaps more importantly, this is the level of chemical treatment that they were using in the water treatment plants beforehand. They roughly halved their chemical treatment costs because of the improved water quality. Within that, if you look at the chlorine, by reducing the chlorine use by about half, we reduced the disinfection byproducts, which are potentially carcinogenic. They'd never been able to comply with 80 micrograms, which is the limit. This is the water treatment plant on another reservoir, and you can see they can't comply. On our reservoir, both plants are compliant now on TTHMs. And then lastly, to show you how we can kind of deploy this across a wide sort of area, this is an aquaculture operation in Australia, 2 identical ponds. This pond, we have our technology, we are managing it, maintaining water quality. You can see what it looks like. Mortality is lower, productivity is better, parasites and diseases are lower. This is an identical pond right next door to it, using what historically has been known as best practice and the best technology and so on. You can see radical difference. So we can tick all these sort of environments. If we look at the India area, I visited India myself, I think 6 times it is. We understand and we're able to deal with a lot of the sort of problems you're dealing with. Here at Bangalore, we know you've got a wastewater treatment plant right next to the lake. Doing a sort of holistic solution that addresses both is the only way to do things. Mumbai, same with the Meठी River, similar sort of situation. Delhi with the Nalas. This should be converted into natural wastewater treatment infrastructure, and we should be treating the water as it passes down those Nalas. Similarly, Sagar Lake, I picked this up recently. The sewage flow is creating what they're calling a delta, but basically the sediment, the organic sediment has accumulated to such an extent that the lake is shallowing out. I've shown you already we can deal with that. We have dealt with exactly the same sort of situation in South Africa. We have a government report on it. This is some photos. You can see the dark water coming in, which is the sewage discharge. This is 1 month after we commissioned, this is 2 months after. So I think in contrast to a lot of the international suppliers, we are familiar with emerging markets and with how severe the challenges are there. We have experience and we can deliver results. So that's it. Harry, I hope I didn't take too long.
You didn't. Thank you so much. We have the experience, we can deliver. Very over to you.
Yes, no, Dave, it was an excellent overview, and I saw some notes in the chat on how wow it is. So perfectly in keeping with the World of Water Action Forum, making action happen, and the restoration of lakes is a really a beautiful vision that you have. Now, we have talked about your vision worldwide. You're actually touching almost every continent today. And tell us about how you plan to scale this and what you would like of the group here for moving this idea and the process forward.
Well, I mean, in terms of the process in engaging and so on, I mean, obviously we're looking for projects. I mean, there's always a catch-22 when you're engaging with a new country. If you show them lots of international case studies, they say, "Oh, but this is different. Do you have local case studies?" And we say, "No, give us one." So, you know, give us a project, and then we can develop local stuff. So, obviously, projects is you know, something we'd like to start with. We have that capability. Our business model is to develop local skill and capability and capacity, so that people are not entirely dependent on us. So, and this is where I think you mentioned earlier, we're working with universities and education institutions and so on, so that we can bring that sort of training and skill transfer and so on into play, and enable people to deploy this technology widely, because the more widely and the more holistically it's deployed, the more economic and effective it is. The more natural infrastructure you have working for you rather than against you, the better.
Right.
So,
and
Dave,
on this
listen,
topic, oh,
Mary, look in the chat there. There's
ahead.
Zeph asked, how large is the lake that was in your case study, Dave?
Well, I covered a number of case studies there. They range from,
Right.
We've done lakes that are several thousand acres. We've done,
Yes.
you know, we've done lakes that are 6, 7, 8 feet deep. We've done lakes and reservoirs that are 150, 200 feet, you know, 50, 60, 70 meters deep. So we've proven across a wide scale. We've also done tropical climates, temperate climates, high altitude. Altitude has a big impact on oxygenation. So we're pretty versatile and experienced in coping with those sort of things.
All right. Okay. We are 37 minutes on the hour. I would request architect Vijay Kumar from Trichy. Are you there, Vijay? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Dr. Hari.
Namaste, namaste. There you are. Well, to the rest of you, let me tell you this about architect Vijay. He's from this small town called Trichy, which is on the banks of a river called Kaveri, one of the ancient sacred rivers of India on the peninsula. They have not had a challenge on water until probably the last, say, 10 years or so, from about 2010. Their population has grown from about 400,000 in 1990 to 1 million or 1.2 million now. The 1/2 of what they require as water for the city comes in on the formal grid supply, and the other half has been met with groundwater withdrawal, from what I have heard from Vijay Kumar. He is the expert here. I have requested Vijay, I shared, you know, I took the liberty, Dave, of sharing some of the insights that you had shared with me on the mail with Mary. And I therefore asked Vijay to see if he can present what he has as a challenge in his city. And of the 3 or 4 challenges, he's told me now in a mail the day before perhaps, that he will focus on one lake that he's been working upon from about 2015 with a wonderful organization called CFU, another one called Bridge Foundation, the Citizen for OEM Conduct, doesn't matter what the name is. So between CFU and Bridge Foundation, they've been working on a few things from 2015. Architect Vijay is one of the people, along with Dr. Narasimha Rao, who is a physician doctor who has nothing to do with water or sustainability, but has a passion for doing these things apart from making a living out of setting people's broken bones. Vijay Kumar, he's an orthopedic, the other guy. Vijay, back to you now. And over to you.
Yeah, this is about a lake which we are engaged in trying to revitalize. And can I share the screen now?
Please. About 10 minutes, Vijay, because we have some stalwarts from Chennai also who might want to share insights after you.
Yeah, I'll.
Dave, I'm hoping that this will give us a good statement of the problem that they have.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this is the lake which we are trying to revitalize. And like any other places, there has been a lot of encroachments. And the red line shows the actual extent of the lake as per the documents. But then we are left with about 40 acres of water. And you can see that there are a lot of government organizations which have been housing which has been built, and also sporadic housing along the entire sides of the lake. And the problems actually what we have is about visibility, and these encroachments have stopped the visibility of the lake, and people have forgotten about the lake. And so we have the solid waste and wastewater being dumped into it. And so the other one is about the accessibility, and all the accessibility to the lake has been totally cut off. So we are working on these three aspects of about solid waste and liquid waste management, and increasing the accessibility and visibility, and putting it to the use of the people, because the city is about 3 kilometers from the lake, and all the water bodies have, this is one of the water bodies where we have water throughout the year. So, unfortunately, all the agricultural land surrounding it has not been used now. So nobody uses this water. So this is, there is a railway track which has been, which cuts the lake into two now. And there are these two main access roads, which are an national highway. And it is only about 260 meters, and on the other side, it's about 170 meters. So that's the access what we have for the lake. And so this is the photograph which we are able to take, and you can see that on the top side, you see that there is a railway yard where the water which they use to clean the wagons that enters into the lake without being treated. And we have so this is the present situation. And so the inflow into the canals, actually we see this red ones are the things where there are three major inflows into the canal. And the blue one, the other light blue one, is the one which is the overflow canal, which goes and joins the finally the Kaveri River. So whenever there is a spate of extensive rainfall, only then this outflow canal works. Otherwise, this is a stagnant water. And so this is the close-up of the same thing. So we have three areas where we have sewage and grey water coming in, and also the wash water from the railway yard. So this is the condition. And so this is one of the canals where we have this 160 feet of canal as it enters into the lake. And what we have proposed is, we thought that this 160 meters could be used as a biotreatment zone. And the same thing can become developed into an access for the lake. So a person has to walk along the treatment plant. So that is our thought process in that. And so this is on the other side, we have quite some land where we have the floodplains of the lake, which are, to some extent, it is still available. So this is another process where we can look at different treatment for this area. So from the point of the proposal, we said that we would like to do two proposals, one on the banks of the lake and the other one on which happens inside. So these are the views which we thought that once we have people move around, then automatically the misuse of the lake stops. So we were looking at the different edges, how we can create. So most of it would be natural edges, except for some areas where we had proposed a concrete retaining wall. So these are the general proposals what we have given on the banks of the lake. And inside the lake, we thought that we could create these islands where we can create some bird life. And so we have given this proposal. And this is what I have to share now.
Dave, 5, 6 crisp, quick takes from you before we go to other speakers.
It's a very doable project. I'd be keen to understand. I saw a lot of surface vegetation in the south section to the right-hand side of the highway. I don't know if that is floating or rooted. If it's rooted, then there's obviously a lot of sediment there. So sediment digestion is what we need. The more, really, I mean, what you're saying is exactly what I've been saying. We need to convert that lake into effectively water treatment infrastructure that can clear those nutrients, bring the birds back, bring the fish life back, and so on. This is exactly what we do.
Hey, how do you want to respond to that? And what do you think Dave Shackleton can do to take this conversation beyond this meeting today? All VOW meetings are not about discussions. They are about action and closure that we can bring. And I'd like to see if between me, Mary, and Frank and others, we can do what we can to enable and facilitate. Architect Vijay.
Dave, I would like to ask you whether the canals, that 160 meter and the floodplain which is bordering the lake, should that be treated as a treatment zone, or whether the lake itself, as you had said. So
the lake itself would be the primary treatment zone, if I put it that way. You're going to have the biggest nutrient clearing capacity in the lake.
Okay.
Obviously, treating upstream in those canals, we can certainly do that. But if you only do that, you're not going to have an impact in the lake. So, you know, we'd have to have a look at it, but we can certainly do upstream treatments so that improves water quality coming into the lake. But you're not going to, typically what I've seen in these sort of nalas and canals and so on, there's a very high organic content. You can begin improving it, and if you have a long run, you can do it. If they're relatively short, your retention time to achieve that is very short. So the lake is your prime asset there.
Yeah, because the water from the lake, it is not used for drinking or for irrigation, and it is just stagnant water. So I think the proposal what you had shown, and the lake itself becoming a natural biorehumidifier, I think that would be the area where we would like to have your expertise on.
Yeah. How many acres did you say the lake is roughly?
It's about 40 acres, what is left now.
Okay, so it's quite small now. Yeah.
Dave, should I ask this silly question? If it is 40 acres, well, what do you think would be a capital cost in US dollar terms? You can give us a figure. We will not sue you in any court.
So cost is kind of made up of two components. One is the hardware cost, which is kind of a capital cost. There, depending on depth, but I would imagine we'd be talking around about the $100,000 mark or a little bit under. For that. It's split by the highway. You're going to need two separate systems and so on. With regard to the treatments, that is determined by flow rates, organic levels, and so on. So that can vary, but one would imagine, and typically what happens there in the first year or two or three, to get the high impact, the level of biological treatments is pretty high. over 3 or 4 years, that typically reduces to about a quarter of what it is.
Okay.
Then we'll be talking tens of thousands, I would think.
So if you're batting, since you're also a cricketing country, since you're batting in the region of $100,000 is about 75 lakhs, is that right, Vijay Kumar? To let's say 1 crore, right?
Yeah.
Now, question to you, Dave. There's someone else saying, I think Vijay echoed that earlier. Neil Matthews says, well, if there is so much as nutrient waste in this, can that also be supported? You know, supporting, let's say, the peripheral, peri-urban agriculture in that area. Is there a way of using that nutrient?
Using that water for irrigation?
Yes. Well, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's right. Is that right, Vijay Kumar? That's also part of
no.
the proposition.
I meant the biomass. Can it be taken and
Neil Matthews? No. Instead, Dave is right. You know, the water itself. That's what Vijay Kumar is also saying. I raised it because you put it on the chat box. I will explain that if necessary. Yes, Mary, you were saying something.
Yeah,
I have a
Sri
question.
Pati.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, Raj. Yes, please.
Oh, I'm
Good
sorry.
morning to you,
Okay.
Raj. Yeah.
And Dr.
morning.
Raj is here, expert. Wonderful to have you here. He started Tetra Tech India and is a tremendous resource and
Thank you.
mentor of global water work community.
Thank you, Mary. A similar project that was done by our colleague, Dr. Prakasham in Vijayanagaram, was done in 2004. And this is a 170-acre lake, which was used for drinking water and for other purposes there. Sewage was coming in and totally ruining the quality of the water. So what Prakasham proposed is diverting this sewage into a 15-acre treatment area through just anaerobic and aerobic filtration, slowing down the water and treating it. These are all 5 to 10 foot deep lagoons. And then after that, the water enters the lake. So with this treatment, they had cleaned up the water. And just like you're proposing here, Vijay Kumar, they did a beautiful road all along the lake with lights, benches for people to sit and enjoy. And Prakasham spent 3 months of his life staying there, getting the design and construction done. And the whole project cost about 3 crores for this 170 plus acre lake, including all the roads that was built around. And now that area is transformed. People use it for evening walks. It's called the Lover's Lane. Everybody uses it beautifully. Otherwise, it was stinking. So these things, and especially the railroad yard, Indian Railways should be told, unless you pre-treat this, you will not let 1 drop of water come into this lake. They have the resources. So railways can do their part, not to let any contaminated water come into the lake. The sewage can be treated in this lagoon, activated lagoons, and then go back to the lake. And like you said, the channel again can be treated, biotreated along the way. And again, create a nice walking pathway. People have to enjoy. Unless people see it, they don't support these projects. They say, oh, it is something I don't care. But if they can use it, they can be there. Like, love your proposals. And ICCW has offered to get some corporate support for you. So I wish you all the luck. And Dave and others will support you as needed, but let's get it done. Action, like Hari said. Thank you.
Amen.
Go ahead.
You are from
Go ahead, Mary. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, Mary, go on, please.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to acknowledge, thank you, Dr. Raj. I think you sort of addressed part of Sri Pati's question
Yeah,
about
yeah,
enzymes not working in India. Enzymes haven't been successful, Dave, in the sewage treatment plants. Can you explain why your process would be successful? And
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. So one, I saw there's some questions about bacteria. You have to understand, wastewater treatment plant operates by using bacteria. And what you're trying to do, typically, and particularly in an activated sludge environment, is produce a microbiological sludge, which is then separated from the water. by producing those microbes, they take up the nutrients, you then separate them. In a lake environment, it makes no sense to add bacteria to produce a sludge, because that's going to settle on the bottom and make the situation worse. A lot of people, there have been a lot of companies who are still supplying bacteria, but calling it enzymes. There are very few actual enzyme products on the market. That's number one. Secondly, if you just chuck enzymes into a water body and you haven't managed the rest of the environment, got the oxygenation right and so on, you are just wasting your money. You need to manage the aquatic environment first before you start doing your biological augmentation. I didn't show you the data, but we have data showing that not only do we oxygenate the water column, but we have created an oxygenated 8 centimeters of sediment at the bottom. That means we are getting aerobic digestion of the sediment. And the enzymes are 2, 3, 5,000 times more efficient in an aerobic environment. So if you don't have the whole package and you're just doing those, I agree. There are lots of people who are supposedly selling enzymes. Enzymes on their own are not a solution.
Yeah, excellent answer. Frank, did you see other questions in the chat?
We'll take them. Before that, Mary, I think we should ask Kaulagi Sripati. Chennai has 2 major lakes. And you know that city's water supply will not be met if you didn't have those 2, Pundi and Chembrambakam. Now, both of these lakes, you know, also have needed treatment. Chandra is nodding his head vigorously. From where you sit, in the context of where you sit at the IIT Madras and, being part of the ICCW, the International Council for Clean Water, what is it that you think we can do to steer? We have Professor T. Swaminathan also from IIT Madras sitting here today. What is it that we can do to see that we are able to connect with some of these things that people like Dave are talking about and bring some change in Chennai? Sripati.
I would say the one or 2 words is participatory management. Without participatory management, whatever may be the technology, whatever may be the richness in the technology, it has to be implemented with participatory management. Otherwise, any amount of effort is going to be very, very difficult for us to get some results. It can be any part of this country. It's not Chennai, Trichy. Even we have lots of cases in Gorakhpur. Gorakhpur has been a place where lots of lakes. So this is what I would like to say on this.
I got that. Dave, you talked about rivers and how you did a measure some 18 kilometers or miles downstream, and you found that there was measurable impact on the quality of water. Is that right, Dave? You did say something like that about rivers and treatment? You have to unmute yourself. Dave? No. No, I was asking you. No, we can't hear you, Dave. There's something wrong with your line. You need to plug it back. No, we can't hear you. Yeah, now we can. Go on. No. Okay. Okay, while he fixes his audio, Chandra, you were talking about the 2 rivers, that really make Chennai, originally at least it gave life to Chennai, Adyar and the Kuam rivers. Now, Dave talked about how he could also bring in treatment systems on the go for a river. I don't know if Dave Shackleton knows how bad the quality of water is in these 2 rivers. Would you want to ask him some question, Chandra, from your context of being yourself a water expert, on what we can do to these 2 rivers in Chennai?
Yeah, actually, as Sripati Kaulagi said, it is a consortium creating the problem, the pollution.
You have to speak louder. You have to speak louder.
Yeah, number 1 is the encroachment, which has already happened very deeply, which has cut away all the water routes, brings in the rainwater and the fresh water into these lakes. That has been totally cut because of a lot of encroachment across. from the source of the river until the end of the river to going down to the sea. Second thing is the dumping of the industrial waste and the effluents and also the sewages from the societies and other thing, which also adds to the waste. So it has to be plugged in the beginning itself. All these things have to be plugged. Government.
Chandra, my question will be to you like this. There is Sripati on one side who is trying to see what he can drive as energies go in Chennai. Then you have all those wonderful people from Ashok to Saravanan, many of, the Janakraj and others who are not here today, all right? They're not here currently, participating in this meeting. The question is, if let's say you are a member of an action group that Chennai forms, right?
Okay.
Is there something you can get, to understand what Dave is talking about and make it happen in one of those rivers, first as a pilot, and then to see if we can make that happen at a larger level?
Okay, so as an action group, what I would suggest is first to take all these ideas into a paper and draft the solution. There is a small area in the whole of Kuvam River, maybe not the whole Kuvam River. We can ask the government. Obviously, it is the government which has to finally give a go-ahead or the approval for any project to get implemented. Then we can select one particular zone which is not much polluted or not much engrossed and more.
Got that. There are many others to speak, as Mary is reminding me from Africa. We have guests too.
So one small pilot could be done.
Yeah.
The pilot serves good, then we can extend it to the whole of Kuvam River and Adayar River.
Sripati, can I take a commitment from you that we will look at something like this and then go back to Shackleton?
Yes, sir. We are having this commitment. So we will give this commitment. As said in my, chat box. ICCW would be very much willing to support any sort of a facilitation drive.
I know, I get that.
In corporates. In fact, I'm now on the call with NIT, Professor Prem Lata.
Oh, wonderful.
She's unable to join the call, but anyway, I've just spoken to her on what all we are talking. She's also listening on the phone.
Lovely.
But this is what we are ready to commit. We wanted to work on this. We want to bring some.
Thank you. Thank you. Vijay, before I hand over the mic to Mary, if let's say there is a bit of this kind of master planning inputs that you need, and if we were to provide you one or two good, reasonably competent research interns, shall we say, would you be able to help Chennai, in documenting or doing whatever you are doing in Trichy?
Yeah, I would like to, because what we have done now is actually we have taken up the restoration of the lakes in Trichy. There are about 40 odd lakes, and this is the first thing, and we have given proposals for 3. The other 2 are defunct quarries. So that is also within the city itself. Okay. And we have got a government sanction for this lake. So it's already on the pipelines, and if we can work out some workable solutions,
absolutely,
it can definitely be the first one.
Absolutely, we will work on it. But trust me on that. This is my commitment. Just as I was asking Sripati for one. Mary, I think you should take over and invite our guest from Africa to speak. Sandy, and go on, please.
Right. Just to Sandy, we're going to get to your question, but Zephaniah, I know in the Great Lakes of Africa and what you're overseeing, you had questions on the size of lakes. What are your questions for Dave and the relevance of this? You also mentioned the fish issue in your Great Lakes.
Thank you, Mary. Dave, this is wonderful work. I'm just wondering if from all your presentation, if there's one of the lakes that you've worked in with this methodology that has high gas content, such as the one we've had challenges with Lake Kivu, because that's a very high methane endowed lake, which usually affects a lot of people. And I'm wondering if this will be able to apply. That's one. Then 2, as I've stated in the chat there, the usual method that we know is the dredging. So I'm wondering if we can transfer some of your skills as a case study at one of the lakes and see how it works out. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Your comments about methane are quite interesting. Where you have really bad anoxic conditions, anaerobic conditions at the bottom, you will get a lot of methane, a lot of hydrogen sulfide, and that sort of things produced. We have had many occasions when we commission the system and begin to run it. The hydrogen sulfide, the methane comes up to the surface, and hydrogen sulfide is toxic. As soon as we detect hydrogen sulfide, we have to turn the system off, let it dissipate, and then we turn it on again. Now, we call that sort of burping the system. We run it, sometimes it literally takes a minute, 2 minutes, we smell the hydrogen sulfide, we turn it off. It's taken us up to 3 days to be able to let the system keep running because there's so much hydrogen sulfide released. We've had the same sort of thing with methane. There was one project, we commissioned the system, guys were out on the lake in a boat, and they immediately called on the radio and said, turn it off, turn it off. We've hit a gas line or a fuel line or something. It smells of hydrocarbon here. There's something wrong. And they genuinely thought that, they said it smells like an oil refinery. And that was the methane and those sort of hydrocarbons that were coming up. And the same sort of thing. After that didn't take that long. After a few hours, that had dissipated. That we're familiar with that problem where you have really severe anoxic conditions at the bottom, typically in deeper water bodies. And we're familiar with dealing with it.
Oh, great. And also, Dave has agreed to make his knowledge available through the Global Waterworks community, where we are setting up a collaboration on HABs and the remediation of HABs. So I'm inviting everyone, there's a chat link that you can join that group where you will also find the leading researcher in cyanobacteria, Wayne Carmichael, who will be speaking at the international gatherings of the Conference on Toxic Cyanobacteria here in Toledo, Ohio in May. And Dave will be visiting the US in May for those people who are in the US. But Sandy, I know you raised a question on CAFOs, these large agricultural facilities. And Dave, Sandy, if you want to articulate that question, or Dave, maybe you saw it, Dave.
Biogas from manure, that's all well and good as long as you're capturing that biogas and using it, because otherwise, the methane and the biogas just becomes greenhouse gas, basically. So, and this is increasingly being recognized as a problem with anaerobic digestion. What our approach there, typically in dairy operations, pig farms and so on, they have their manure ponds, they create a slurry, and they spray that over their pastures and fields and so on. The trouble is that manure is not biochemically, the nutrients are not bioavailable. It needs to be digested and broken down. So what we will typically do is use those manure ponds. We have a dairy in Ohio where they have 3 ponds, and the cost of water was going up. So they've got 3 ponds, and basically the water just perpetually circulates around those ponds. So the water, every 2 hours, I think they flush 200,000 liters through the barns. There used to be 300 cattle there. I think there's now 500. They want to take it up to 800. We then process that water through the lagoons. They can use that water because the organics are broken down. It's bioavailable. So that can be used to irrigate, and the nutrients are going to be taken up by the plants and in the soil rather than washed off. And the water can be continually recirculated for flushing the barns.
Yeah, excellent.
I don't know if that answers her questions. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Mary. If the more we get into technical questions, the more we will get off from what we need as commitments. As you rightly just now pointed out to me, Mary. I'd like to see if I can ask PK Prasad, for instance. Prasad, are you there? Good evening to you. Namaste. Prasad?
Good evening.
Thank you for being there. You know that 2 days ago we spoke to Sweet Kohli and the head of the Rotary water body that you have.
Mr. Dingra. Yeah.
Now you're hearing what he's speaking about today. Dave Shackleton is telling us about, and you know the challenge because it's a Trichy, and you have a couple of Rotarians in Trichy. You wear 2 caps. You're the Indian Plumbing Association chairperson, and then you're also from Rotary. Now, is there a way we can talk about? And you heard Vijay. Vijay is saying, look, I have a mandate. He's clearly saying this today. Unequivocal. He's saying, I have a mandate from the government to try and see what I can do to work a solution, and for which he wants inputs from Dave. That's one. Now talk about Chennai and talk about these 2 wonderful rivers, which are 600, from the time the city was born in 1535, Chennai, that is, you had these 2 rivers. From 1910 or so that Chandra is talking. Chandra says that in 1910, there was boating in 1920s after the war, after the first war. Now I'm saying if there is a way the Rotarians in Chennai can join together, first offer a very small sum, and we shame the government into coming in with the rest of the money, and work on Dave's proposal on what he can do to a running reverse wastewater treatment mechanism. Dave, Prasad, your take.
Yeah, well, we can do that. Basically, we already have a person who is doing, very big lakes. Mohan, Rotarian Mohan, who has done already 2 huge lakes, 170 acre or 250 acre lakes. 2 lakes he has done in the last 2 years.
In which part would you have done?
I don't have the names with me as such, but this is with the, I think they did with the help of the break. Somebody from corporates.
Lovely.
I can put you on the persons who are here in Chennai to Mohan, who is already doing a wonderful job on the of lakes. So we can take it for Kuam River and the other one. It's like you remember last year in Rotary in Bangalore, we thought about cleaning Rishabhavati River in Bangalore, of course. But, the cost involved is 4,000 crores. That's huge. It's beyond anybody's.
It is not so much. Prasad, we will talk about it again.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Dave, or Mary was telling me 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
It actually opened my eyes to a whole lot of things. She was talking about how it cost about $180,000. Dave will correct me if I'm wrong. $180,000, maybe 1.2, 1.3 crore rupees for a lake of, how many acres was that, Mary?
30 or 50.
38 or 40 acres, right?
Which lake was that, Mary?
Oh, that was Peekskill. Was that 60 acres?
Yeah, that's 60 acres there, yeah.
Okay, that's 60 acres for you, Prasad. So the cost.
No, but fine. That is for a lake. I'm talking about Rishabhavati River is about 65 kilometers long.
Yeah. Sripati, I see your note on Vishwanath and Sri Ram Prasad now. That Ram's known to me for the last 20 years of 2005 or so.
We know.
Don't worry about that. We know those guys. We'll see where we will bring them if necessary, Sripati. So back to you, Prasad. I would say this gentleman, Rotarian Mohan, Mary, Dave Shackleton. Let's see if and Architect Vijay. Let's see if we can do a call sometime or the other. The whole point is this: an action forum like this cannot stop. It has to, acknowledge that this is just the beginning of a conversation. Right. I think we are seeing some traction from Trichy. I don't know what Chennai is offering. I'm not so sure just now. Chandra is saying something interesting about these 2 rivers, and if Rotary can come in there with some commitment, we can then see how Stalin's government can. Is it Stalin there? Yes, it is. We have also a Stalin here in
Dr. Hariharan, there's a problem touching these, there are so many governmental issues which go into this, stopping of sewage going into that first, to permissions to be granted, evacuating people staying on there, and in the industries which are, letting all the effluents into the.
Understood. We'll keep that in mind. Yeah, we are now 75 minutes on the start.
Lakes, yes, of course we can do.
Yeah.
Lakes, we can do it.
Got that. Thank you, Prasad. We will come back to you. Mary, back to you. Is there anything that you want to ask anyone from here?
Yeah, I think there were a number of questions. We'll get back to people if they want to add something in the chat. We'll have it sent out when Hari sends out the link to the meeting. But Dave, final comments to you on this time. And actually, before we do that, if everyone could unlock and show their pictures, I can get a picture of people here in this community. Because sort of a first time opportunity to say we are going to be restoring lakes across the world, and we want to make sure you okay. Smile. We'll give 2 more seconds.
Sripati, please, and Mr. Rajgopal and Prasad.
Okay.
Can I have just a question for Dave?
Yes,
Dave, would you suggest that we first de-sludge the lake before we start the program, or the
great
whole
picture,
process?
everyone.
Again, Vijay, sorry.
Great. Dave, did you hear that?
Sorry, no, I didn't.
Dave, I just wanted to know if we should first de-sludge the lake before we start the whole work, or is it not necessary?
Not necessary. Dredging lakes is extremely expensive, very messy. Once you've dredged it, you have to dispose of all that sludge. Lake Peekskill that we're talking about there, I think there in the first year, we digested 100,000 cubic yards of sediment. That would have been the equivalent of something like 3,500 truckloads. And the municipal manager there said, if we had done it that way, I would now have to reconstruct all those roads after having that truck traffic. So there's no need to do it. We can biodigest it, we biodredge it. It's way, way cheaper, less messy, and just a better way of doing it.
Okay. 76 minutes. I will say this primarily to you, Architect Vijay, and thank you, Dr. Narasimha Rao, for being there. I know you're being quiet. Do you want to add anything before I say what I want to say, Narasimha Rao? Okay. Well, Vijay, I think you should be, if that's possible, be the first person to see if you can initiate something to take it to that point when you believe, say, as the anchor for this, lake project in Trichy, as the anchor for it, to see that you think that it's reached a point when you can take it to the government agency, right? I mean, you're a professional who knows how to evaluate these things, which will also mean one more thing for you, and I'll be as candid as I can be in a meeting of this kind. You will hear out Dave Shackleton with another detailed meeting with him, and we will enable that, facilitate that for you.
So, thank you.
We can't be mentoring that process, you know.
Yeah,
it as well.
I've already submitted a detailed project report on this. I'm just waiting for an expert to help us in the water treatment part.
Fantastic. So what we'll also do is that we will not leave it on Dave. We will see if we can, as someone suggested now, we heard Rotarian Prasad speaking. We'll see if we can get one more person in order that you are satisfied that what Dave is offering you, okay, in order that your ability to ask questions is enhanced, right? The quality of your asking is enhanced. Let's see then after that what you want to do. I mean, the story that Dave is telling us is very compelling. You know what I heard today? I mean, if I went with the fine print, he's bringing earnest. He's not talking business. He's talking of doing something. You saw those pictures, pre and post, phenomenal. I could see that. And if he says 2 months, you know that it's 2 months, right? And I'd like to see if we can therefore bring one project to fruition in Trichy, and that will catapult or catalyze something else with Sripati and other such champions in Chennai or in Hyderabad. Kalpana is not here. Sudeep Kohli is not here, who told us about budgets that Rotarians have got, at the national level for watersheds and for water bodies. So these are all people who will back it. We had 110 registrations so today, but a lot of them have not signed in here. They will get the recording just as you will get it. My whole point is this: if you, Vijay, can start something off that lead us to see how we can take other things from there. Mary, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, just that this is a continuation, and in 2 weeks we will meet again on renewable water, and we'll be able to look at additional solutions. But right. We do encourage everyone to, if you had a question or something specific, share your email. We'll be following up, and as we'll work with Dr. Hari to make sure that a recap of these chat questions is available to everyone. And Dave, any final thoughts as our guest speaker? It was
before
wonderful.
That, can I ask, you are one of those guys who's working on water projects, right? Water bodies and such. From what you heard of Dave speaking, and then you heard of what Vijay was sort of outlining as a statement of challenge or problem that he's got. What is your take, Ganges, really?
I mean, it's amazing. You know, the what I'm admiring is the short duration that is able to solve the problem and the cost. These two things are certainly wonderful. We've been working on constructed wetlands and aerated wetlands. We are solving some complex problems on the effluent treatment plants. And I've been at lakes for almost 3 years now. I have walked along the lakes, along the Ganges River for miles and miles. I've seen the problems, but economic solutions, quick. These two things are really something that surprised me today. And thanks for sending this invitation. I'm looking forward to understand and how this can be taken forward. I'm right now resonating 2 lakes that are algal blooms. I use certain techniques on the phytoremediation as well as bioremediation. I would not hesitate to share the results as soon as I'm able to accomplish this. The works will start next month.
God bless you for saying that, because these are all beyond, beyond borders of business. And I requested you to speak because I know of the significant work that you are doing, Ganges. And what we will do is this, if it's all right with you, and if I have your consent, Mary and I will invite you to, when we have the chat with Vijay and Dave and a couple of others, to see how we can offer Vijay, a set of things that he believes can become part of his PDR for what he is presenting to the government. Is that right, Vijay? Yes,
that's perfect.
Lovely, lovely. Over to you now, Dave Sheth. And thank you so much for your time, Dave.
Oh, just really thank you, I guess. Thank you for the opportunity. As Mary said, I have to be back in the US around about April, May, and from then for the rest of the year, I'm pretty much based there. I'm hoping, if we have enough interest, to visit India late February, early March, and that might be a time to start quantifying some of these projects, collecting the information necessary for us to table a proposal and a cost.
Sure.
So if there are people that want to progress to that, then we're very amenable and for that.
Sure. For those of you who don't know, Dave is just now in South Africa. He's 4.5 hours away from us. And Mary and the rest of them are they are about 11.5 hours or 12 hours away. Okay, so you're going farther away from us, Dave, after say April or so. We'll try and see if that's possible. I mean, you've come 6 times. The 7th time won't hurt you.
Yeah.
We'll see if that can happen after Vijay comes back. Vijay is crucial this time. Vijay, if you and Narasimha can make this happen there, we can then see how it will inspire people in Chennai to do something. We have got Deepak Vaikar here from Singapore, lovely man who can help us document things. We have got Indrani here from Columbia University. She's every time, brimming with so much enthusiasm when it comes to documenting or doing things with the sets of challenges that we are trying to see if we can wrap our heads and arms around. That's it, I think, unless somebody wants to say something that's significant as a takeaway. Anyone else wants to say anything? We are.
Just would like to share that India is going to have a major challenge in terms of our thinking. We cannot stop sewage going into the lakes. Stop the sewage going into the lakes. We don't have solutions. We have to let the sewage go into the lakes and dissolve it right in the lake. Making an opportunity to contribute a conventional polluting system.
Please mute lady Ramani Iyer. Somebody must mute her. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Ganesh. Yeah.
I was just saying that in every lake is a potential opportunity to solve the problem then and there locally.
I got that.
Yes, and I would just like to add one final thing. The Paradox of Infrastructure is a white paper that Dave will be coming out with, talking about exactly that, Mr. Reddy, that we have our fixed pipes and pumps, and we have natural infrastructure. And the beautiful thing is we can have a renewable system when we look at it all together and respect our lakes and bring them into it. So it's a beautiful opportunity for us all. Maria Kelson, thank you for joining us from America and pointing out what a wonderful theme that will be, the Paradox impacts of infrastructure if we can work with nature and bring in Dave's solution. So thank you, Dr. Hari, a beautiful
Thank
time
you.
and for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
joining.
Mary is right. Dave said this once, and she's, reminding us again. Dave, maybe you should say this in the ways that you said before the meeting began on natural infrastructure and the charm of such infrastructure, the strength of it, and why on earth are we focusing on physical infrastructure, or something to this effect you had said earlier. In your words, please.
Well, it's like I say earlier, it's really about getting a balance and getting the built infrastructure working with the natural infrastructure. At the moment, the two are in opposition to each other, and the more built infrastructure we create, the more it degrades the natural infrastructure. If we get the two working together and we get a virtuous circle going there, I believe for the emerging market economies, this can act as a leapfrog technology. You don't need to invest as much in concrete and steel infrastructure, because you can get the natural infrastructure working for you. There's a balance to be had there, which at the macroeconomic level has huge value.
Absolutely.
Dave, just one comment. In Kolkata, India, they are using the natural infrastructure of the lakes and wetlands beautifully to treat all their wastewater for a huge city of Kolkata. So when you go to India, I will introduce you to the right person. You can go and see that, how they're doing it. Okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we have had some very, very useful contributions. And I'm very glad that people like Gangesh Reddy, of course, Sripati, and others are, and Vijay saying that he will also help us in Chennai when we get to doing some mapping there. Very, very lovely. Very nice to hear this. Finally, nothing can happen, as Dr. Raj keeps saying, if we don't get all of us to go beyond, these blessed things called the government and get down to acting ourselves. Dave didn't want to say this in a formal meeting like this, but just before this got to begin, he says that, every time he's come to India, he started, of course, in 2014 or so when he first came in here, with a decent amount of earnest and enthusiasm in the clear hope and conviction that he will get to working with somebody or the other in India. He says he went to Maharashtra, he went to Delhi, of course. What he didn't say is that it was impossible to get anything or anyone to say anything that was definitive, right? So how do we change that is a question that we are all asking as earnest citizens and earnest leaders who have been working in water for as many years. People like Chandra have been in it for the last, say, 20 years. And if there is an effort that we are making here, Mary is making from there along with Frank, it's all to try and see how we can enable and facilitate this process for you. I think I should stop there. Thank everybody for being here. 87 minutes so far. Wonderful meeting, Mary.
Wonderful meeting, and we wish
Thank
you
you.
all a great night. We'll stay in touch through the community and just see you in 2 weeks. So
Yes.
Thank you again.
And well, I must
Okay.
tell you that tomorrow there is another meeting. Is that right? Tomorrow is the no, we don't have it. There are other meetings, but nothing to do with. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Wonderful session. Wonderful session.
For all of us,
Thanks, Dave.
thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Victor.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. We'll
Have
come
a
back on all
wonderful
those
day.
questions that you asked. Frank has put them down. We will respond to all of you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dave.
Raval ji, आपका जो भी questions थे, they will all be responded to, answered. We will see that we get you to talk to people. Gangesh Reddy, we will come back to you. You're working on wetlands too. We need to see that we pick your mind on things. That's it. Prabhat is here. Prabhat, we must get you to see if we can, lock our minds on one lake somewhere in your area, south of Bangalore, along with our Suresh Prakash. We'll see if we can work on something for some time. I mean, we don't have to do it right now. Thank you for being here and paying attention to what Dave was offering. That's it, I think. Dr. Liaquat Ali Khan, I know you're listening. We will come back to you. I know you have some interest. Maybe it will grow upon you, and someday you will bring in some. He comes from some place called the Aligarh Muslim University, a very 200-year-old university, very, very prestigious university. But he's like I put that note out there. He's a geologist, an economic geology person. He says now interested in gemstones, but also in water. Very, very lovely people out here. Lots of them here. Kim Panchami, you're hearing. I'm sincerely hoping, Prem, that you will somewhere do some magic to this whole thing. We need to bring the spontaneity of such discussions into those media approaches that I'm really hoping you will, sort of bring to people. If say 50 people or 60 people were here today, how do we get this, the energy connected to at least 5,000 people in Bangalore? If I don't want to be, audacious and say 100,000, right? So,
yeah. We're working through it.
I'm sure.
We'll slowly build up to it. Yeah.
Right. I'll share your recording with Mary and Frank, and I'm sure as people who are very, very good enablers, they will have some inputs on the strategy that you're just now talking about. Or maybe you can send it to them. I think you have got both their mail IDs, Mary's and Frank's.
I do. I'm in touch with Mary actually. So
lovely. Why don't you send it to her and let's see what that means. Yeah. So this is it. I can't think of anybody else here. Vasumati and you're both listening to this. I know you have nothing to do with the domains that we're talking about, and thank you for being here this evening. You're seeing what Dave is talking about, and coming from that kind of position that he or space he inhabits or has inhabited for the last so many decades. He understands intuitively the nature of water and its properties. Now, how do you take something like what Dave has got beyond business into disseminating it as knowledge? I don't know just now. You are the guys who know how to make them into capsules, as you would call them.
Right. So I mean, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful evening. And I heard the perspectives and the talks from various dignitaries. It's been a great thing to understand and get their insights. And a long way to go is what I feel. I would not be able to contribute much at this juncture, but a long way to go. And together we can certainly make it happen.
I'm sure. Yeah, and Vasumati are people who connect with hundreds of students in India, Mary.
Oh,
remember
wonderful.
Yes. They work with graduate students in multiple colleges and universities across the country. Sorry, Vasumati, I'll come back to you. And Mary, I was telling you, you and I were supposed to have a conversation on what we need to do to bring, to produce professionals that people like Dave will want to hire, right, someday. And that is a conversation that we will have with both Daya and Vasumati. Vasumati, you wanted to say something?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, sir. This is that will be the first time that we are hearing to people who really work. So it's something amazing to see how you guys are supporting each other and working, and we are happy to be part here.
Right. Sure.
Thank you so much.
It's all about the next generation, and engaging them is something. They're very agile with technology, so we hope that the Global Waterworks platform we're promoting will be in a place where they can leverage stories and spread the word that we can all together make water work.
Yeah, Deepak Vaikar, I know it's beyond your dinner time. It must be nearly 10 o'clock now in your city, Singapore. Any notes from you, Deepak? You're to unmute. Am I? No, we can't hear you yet. There is a audio challenge there. No, an audio challenge. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so he's reconnecting that. Okay, that's it. Indrani, you're here. Would you want to add something? I know it's been a terrible week for you with all the teaching and the resuming of sessions. No, she's also had to leave, I think, Mary, because she had a class in the morning, I think, right? And she must have been traveling. She has a long ride. Yes, Deepak, you want to say something?
Can you hear me now? No.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Technology again. Okay. So I was using. Thank you very much. I think fantastic, Dave. I think you have taken us through fantastic way, natural way to rebuild the water. Okay, fantastic one. And as far as I think I have been saying to Hariharan and also to Mary that if students can be involved, faculty can be involved for research project you got, I'd be very happy to work with anyone. Okay. Now, Hariharan knows, and also our Raj also knows IUCC. Okay, IUCC is one of the organization foundation, but we are working mainly on engineering education, and we are looking for partners who can offer internship or can offer student projects, who can offer some seminars, webinars, whatever, and I'll be very happy to connect that way. So,
Architect Vijay, if you're still here,
Hariharan?
Yes, please. I'll put it like this to you, Deepak. I will in the next, say, 3 or 4 days, and this is a promise I'll keep, I'll try and see if, let's say, the Trichy delegation or the Chennai one, especially relating to water bodies and treatment, will need 1 or 2 interns from you. And if you can give us somebody like that, we'll be grateful. We'll work with them. We'll need, in one more space, we need somebody who can work with us on such, shall we say, allied research areas. And we will come back to you on that. I will write to you about this. But thank you for making that offer. I deeply appreciate, and I'm grateful to you for saying that. Maybe you want to respond to what Deepak said. I know we have gone over time, but this is a conversation beyond whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, to be active in Singapore would be wonderful. We work with folks at PUB and Deepak, why don't we
BCNA also,
a follow-up. I think we're going to have Dave all across the world running from one country to the next.
When he's visiting India, go via Singapore. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The key to get David to run across the world is let's focus on getting a couple of projects up that certainly will be the true answer to the questions and demonstrate what David has already demonstrated through his case studies and his work that he's done across the globe.
Frank, that's the design I'm looking for. I'm trying to see if, let's say, Deepak places 1 or 2 of his interns, right? And Vijay says, yes, these are guys as resource persons who can help me to position my PDR well, or DPR well with the government there in Trichy. It then moves one more step closer to whatever we want. And that's why I said, currently, right now, it can be Vijay Kumar who can sort of spearhead this for us. Of course, there will be others who will come later. I don't know if that sort of answers your question, Frank.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Vijay committed, Sripati with ICCW, and then Crore had committed, and then I know BK said with Rotary there are opportunities, and I just placed in the chat Zephaniah with the Great Lakes of Africa mentioned that they have tremendous problems and they want to be able to test this in their area, and they work with the Great Lakes of the US. Interestingly, the two combined supply 45% of the fresh water of the world, so we have connections with both sides. So Dave, I think we have a world of opportunity for you, and we're so thrilled that you came to us through an India connection. So we're circling back, and we'll meet again in a few weeks and have
Sandy has not spoken, Mary, and though you took her name twice. Sandy, do you want to say something in response to what David's presented and this entire conversation of today? Sandy, bye. You want to say something? No. Okay. Fair enough. I think we should close now. Thank you for, it's nice that you're all staying way beyond time. We normally close by about, by the 70th minute or so. But I just thought, since you're all here, we'll just continue. Look at Deepak. Deepak is at, it must be 10:15 for him now or 10:20, but that's right.
Not to worry, okay.